Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I just want to take a moment to say a huge thank you for all the endless support. Because of you, the channel has officially been monetized. I'm incredibly grateful for every like, comment, and view, and I'm so excited for what's ahead. Now, let's get into the video. A film adaptation of a hugely popular Broadway musical was released in September of 2021, just 5 years after the musical itself premiered in December of 2016. This is a stark contrast to other musicals like Wicked or Heathers, which surprisingly started as a movie in the first place. Even Hamilton, arguably an even bigger phenomenon, still hasn't received a proper film adaptation. Anyway, the musical I'm referring to is Dear Evan Hansen. Originally written by Steven Levenson, with the music and lyrics later crafted into a Broadway musical by Benj, Pasek, and Justin Paul. In this analysis, I'll be comparing the original stage production, its written adaptation, and the 2021 film to examine how the same story changes across different mediums and why Dear Evan Hansen ultimately struggled to capture what made the musical resonate with audiences in the first place. The origins of Dear Evan Hansen can be traced back to the creative collaboration between playwright Steven Levenson and songwriting duo Benj Pasek and Justin Paul, who wanted to tell a story about what it feels like to grow up in a world where social media somehow makes everyone more connected and more isolated at the exact same time. Sound familiar? The idea came from conversations about teenage anxiety, loneliness, and the strange pressure people feel to turn every emotional moment into something Instagram-worthy, even when their lives are clearly falling apart behind the scenes. Levenson was also inspired by stories of students who only seemed to receive attention or sympathy after tragedy struck, helping to shape the central conflict of Evan Hansen, a painfully awkward teenager whose desperate need to belong leads him into a lie that spirals completely out of control. And not just a small lie either, but the kind of lie where you keep thinking, okay, now would probably be a good time to come clean, but instead somehow end up giving inspirational speeches to entire schools. The musical first premiered at Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. in 2015 before transferring to Off-Broadway and eventually opening on Broadway in 2016, where it quickly became a massive success thanks to its emotional storytelling and painfully relatable depiction of social anxiety. Songs like Waving Through a Window resonated with audiences because they captured the feeling of wanting to be noticed while simultaneously wanting to disappear forever whenever someone actually looks at you. The show's focus on mental health and online identity felt especially relevant to younger audiences, helping it grow into a cultural phenomenon almost overnight. However, when the story was later expanded into a novel and eventually the 2021 film adaptation directed by Stephen Chbosky, many people felt something got lost in translation. What worked on stage as an intimate, emotionally heightened musical suddenly felt much stranger under the harsh realism of film, proving that sometimes Broadway logic does not survive exposure to high-definition cameras. One of the biggest reasons Dear Evan Hansen worked so well as a stage musical is that the songs do far more than just fill space between scenes. They practically function as the characters' inner thoughts, emotional breakdowns, and therapy sessions set to music. The musical opens with Anybody Have a Map, a song that completely establishes one of the show's central themes, the fear and confusion that comes with parenting teenagers who seem impossible to understand. Heidi Hansen and Cynthia Murphy sing about feeling completely lost while trying to help their sons navigate life, even though both families are emotionally disconnected in very different ways. It's an effective opening because it introduces the audience to the idea that nobody in the story really knows what they're doing. It seems like the adults are just improvising with slightly more bills and stress. Nearly every major song pushes the story forward or reveals something the characters are too uncomfortable to say out loud. Waving through a window, for example, immediately establishes Evan's crushing social anxiety and isolation, perfectly capturing the universal experience of wanting connection while also being terrified of human interaction. It basically became the anthem for anyone who has ever stared at a group chat for 20 minutes trying to figure out whether saying lol sounded natural. For Forever is equally important because it marks the moment Evan's lie truly begins, as he invents a fictional friendship with Connor Murphy in order to confront Connor's grieving family. The song is beautiful and emotional, which is exactly why it works so well dramatically, and audiences almost want to believe Evan's story, even while knowing it is built on complete fiction. My personal favorite song, Sincerely Me, provides comic relief by showing Evan, Jared, and Connor creating fake emails to manufacture evidence of this imaginary friendship, and its upbeat tone temporarily distracts from the fact that they are essentially committing emotional fraud with the confidence of three teenagers who definitely think they're smarter than they actually are. Meanwhile, songs such as Requiem and If I Could Tell Her deepen the emotional complexity of the Murphy family and Evan's growing guilt, allowing the audience to understand how grief, loneliness, and misunderstanding affect every character differently. Real quick, if you're enjoying this video and want to support the channel in a bigger way, check out my Patreon. It's a great way to help me keep creating. You'll get some cool extras like behind-the-scenes stuff, early access, and more. Links in the description if you want to take a look. Thanks so much. As the musical progresses, the songs become even more emotionally necessary. You Will Be Found transforms Evan from an invisible teenager into a viral symbol of hope, while also critiquing how quickly social media turns personal tragedy into public inspiration. The number works brilliantly on stage because it feels overwhelming and sincere at the same time, even if the audience quietly realizes that the entire movement is built on a lie held together by motivational hashtags. To Break in a Glove is especially important because it gives Connor's father Larry a rare moment of vulnerability as he tries to bond with Evan through an awkward metaphor about breaking in a baseball glove. On paper, it sounds almost absurdly simple, but the song is really about parenting, failure, and the difficulty of connecting with people you love. It slows the pace of the musical in a meaningful way, allowing the audience to sit with grief rather than constantly rushing toward the next emotional climax. Another major cut from the film was Good For You, which is arguably one of the most important songs in the entire second act because it finally forces Evan to confront the damage he has caused. For most of the story, Evan's lies accidentally improve his life, but Good For You strips away the illusion as Heidi, Jared, and Alana all call him out for his selfishness and manipulation. It is messy, angry, and emotionally uncomfortable, and that is exactly why it matters. Removing it from the film weakens Evan's accountability arc significantly, making the movie feel softer and less willing to challenge its protagonist. Ironically, in trying to make the adaptation more cinematic and streamlined, the film ended up cutting many of the songs that gave the stage version its emotional honesty and complexity in the first place. What remained was still recognizably Dear Evan Hansen, but without several of its most important musical moments. The story often felt less like a deeply personal exploration of loneliness and more like a very expensive PSA about the internet. Songs like Only Us, Words Fail, and So Big So Small are also crucial to why the stage musical feels emotionally complete in a way the film never fully achieves. Only Us represents the peak of Evan's fantasy life, where he finally experiences the connection, love, and acceptance he has been craving for the entire story. The song is intentionally warm and sincere, which makes it emotionally complicated because the audience knows this relationship is built on lies, even while wanting the characters to be happy. It captures one of the musical's central ideas. Sometimes people become so desperate to feel seen that they convince themselves their dishonesty is somehow justified. Then comes Words Fail, arguably the emotional breaking point of the entire show, where Evan finally admits the truth and completely unravels in front of the Murphy family. Unlike many dramatic Broadway confession songs that feel polished or triumphant, Words Fail is messy, uncomfortable, and painfully human. Evan can barely explain himself because there really is no explanation that fixes what he's done, and that's exactly what makes the song so effective. It forces both Evan and the audience to sit in the consequences of his actions rather than escaping them through inspirational optimism. Finally, So Big So Small provides the emotional resolution of the musical through Heidi Hansen, who reflects on raising Evan as a single mother and reassures him that she will continue loving him despite everything that has happened. The song is devastating in its simplicity because it strips away all the lies, social media, attention, and dramatic conflict, leaving only the deeply human relationship between a mother and her son. It reminds the audience that underneath all the chaos, Dear Evan Hansen is ultimately a story about people trying and often failing to connect with each other. Together, these songs give the musical its emotional balance, allowing it to move between hope, guilt, humor, grief, and vulnerability without losing sight of its characters. The film adaptation still includes some of these numbers, but without the same theatrical intimacy and build-up. Many moments feel strangely muted, as though the movie understands what scenes are important, but not entirely why they mattered so much in the first place. Ultimately, the downfall of the 2021 film adaptation of Dear Evan Hansen can't really be discussed without mentioning the casting elephant in the room, Ben Platt. While Platt originated the role on Broadway and undeniably helped make the character iconic by the time filming began, he was almost 30 years old, playing a deeply awkward high school senior, and unfortunately, the movie's extreme close-up realism made that impossible to ignore. On stage, audiences are generally willing to suspend disbelief because their theater naturally operates with a certain level of exaggeration. Everyone agrees not to question why a group of clearly adult performers is singing about algebra homework under dramatic blue lighting. Film, however, is much less forgiving, especially when the camera is close enough to count every pore in someone's forehead. As a result, Evan sometimes looked less like an anxious teenager and more like a substitute teacher who accidentally wandered into the wrong classroom and decided to stay. The internet naturally noticed this immediately, and discussions surrounding the movie quickly became flooded with memes, jokes, and increasingly brutal comparisons that overshadowed much of the actual story itself. What makes the situation even stranger, and funnier, is that the film also included genuinely talented actors like Amy Adams, Julianne Moore, Caitlin Dever, and Amanda Stenberg, all of whom delivered solid performances despite the material around them struggling to find a consistent tone. Adams and Moore, in particular, couldn't fully overcome the awkwardness created by translating such an intensely theatrical musical into realistic cinematic drama. Scenes that felt heartfelt on stage occasionally became unintentionally uncomfortable on screen, largely because musicals rely heavily on emotional stylization, something that can feel natural in a theater but oddly alarming when performed in a perfectly normal suburban living room captured in high definition. The film was ultimately met with mixed to negative reviews from critics and audiences alike, many of whom felt it misunderstood what made the original musical resonate so strongly in the first place. By cutting important songs, softening Evan's accountability, and leaning too heavily into realism while still asking audiences to accept Broadway-style logic, the adaptation ended up trapped somewhere between sincere drama and accidental comedy. In the end, Dear Evan Hansen serves as a fascinating example of how not every successful stage musical automatically translates to film, no matter how beloved the source material may be. Sometimes, stories are meant to exist under stage lights, with orchestras swelling in the background and audiences willingly crying beside strangers. And sometimes, unfortunately, Putting those same stories in 4K just makes everyone ask why a 30-year-old man is singing at a high school pep rally. Thank you so much for watching. This video took a lot of time to make, so I would really appreciate it if you would leave a like and subscribe. And please make sure to turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a future upload. More quality videos like this one are coming soon. Once again, I really appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.